everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our lovely guest, Julien. Would you like to give a few words about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Julien. I've been in the community of objective personality for the last couple of years, and so I've been studying that system kind of on and off for that time. And right now, I'm interested in doing these interviews because I've been doing interviews with Josh and Austin in the community with our channel, personality type Q&As, and just editing these interviews over and over again. I'm just like, I want to do some blasting, you know? I'm sick of this consumer sleep.
It's your time to shine, Julien. Your time in the hot spot after interviewing so many people in your channel. If you guys don't know already, Julien is an ISFP, but he's a jumper. So he's FI and I.
I should have mentioned that.
And so I have a few questions to ask you about that. So how does self over tribe show up in your life?
Well, basically, the main thing in my life that I've always been kind of concerned about is how to be a better individual or person. Like, so the major focus has always been like, how can I be the best me? Or like, how can I be the best with what I'm giving? And it comes from a very subjective perspective. So it's like not ideal to go forward just asking yourself, how can I be the best? Because it's so subjective. You're only seeing the piece of the puzzle. So, but that's where my focus has always been geared towards. It's like, how can I be the best? So, and then as the tribe is last, being an IP, it's like, how can I be the best so that later on I can help the tribe and help the world be better, you know? But that sense of significance, like Tony Robbins' human needs, really applies, I think, to the IPs and myself especially, speaking only from a personal perspective. That need for significance and that need for self-betterment and self-improvement and just goodness, I suppose, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so I guess refining the contents of the self.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like skills, upgrading worldviews, upgrading kind of maturity. But it's like all these terms are kind of subjective, but I guess on the path of the IP, you come to see that, yourself by yourself is not enough, especially for sleep, like being sleep lead in the animals. Can I say sleep? Is your channel using those terms? It's all good?
Oh, for sure. We can talk about objective personality in this. Yeah, all terms, okay. Free reign.
Free reign, yeah. So on objective personality, I'd be sleep lead because in objective personality, I'm a jumper, that's FI-NI. And so the sleep as the first animal is looking inward and it's asking itself questions and it's asking and it's looking for answers within itself. It's very much like contemplation, I think, in a way. And so for myself, I've always looked to myself to see like, how can I become better? How can I improve? How can I become the best of the best? What kind of whatever thing? And then the realization sets in later in life, after my 20s or whatever, or seeing objective personality or get into the world a little bit to see like, oh, actually, I can't really rely on myself for all the answers. In fact, like I'm really screwing myself over if I'm the one who thinks that I have the answers to these questions, which is very automatic. It's like I can ask myself, how am I going to solve this problem? But really, the answer was never in me. I mean, maybe there is an answer in me, but likely there's someone else with more experience, with a better sort of tool set that can answer the question in a more refined way than I can. And so going to that source would be more beneficial to me rather than always looking inward.
Yeah, so Benjamin calls DI looking to the self as the ultimate authority. And it's kind of like when you're DI savior, you kind of have to like look outside of yourself for like, I don't know, to grow or something for the final authority.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know if the DI can ever get past the self being the final authority. I mean, I guess it kind of depends whether it's geared TI or FI. Like for myself, because it's FI, the final authority is my values. And so because that's such a personal thing, it's always like, if I want to solve something, then I go to other people as the authority to solve something. But if it comes down to my own personal values, then I can go to other people to model their lives and see how they're succeeding or what their values are and upgrade my value system. But at the end of the day, in the moment, making decisions, it will come down to my personal values. And that's it's very difficult to ever put the authority into someone else. Like you can do it from moment to moment, but over like the course of a lifetime, it's very like, it's crazy how self-driven it is and how self-inward looking it is. It's really annoying actually. But I mean, anybody can do anything. It's just that we have certain tools that we're geared towards using. You know, with FI, my tools are like knowing what I like, because that's where my attention is going. It's where our attention goes in our psychology. And so my attention is going inward as to what do I like and what's my future going to look like? How can I make my future based on what I like happen? And so those are my tools that I get to use, and everything else is like off the board. And so I have to go outward to go find those other tools. Like, how do I actually make this work? Like, how do I gather the actual sensory to do this? Like, how do I get started? How do I work with others? Blah, blah, blah. You know, all these things come after the fact. And it's the same for everybody else. Like, I can try to have the same goal as someone else who's a different type, my opposite type, and they'll start with the different tools, the opposite tools. But in the end, we all have to use everything to accomplish something to its, you know, maximum level.
Absolutely. You need all the functions to succeed, not just your saviors. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you can succeed with your saviors, but I mean, to really succeed in a powerful way, I think sustainably, you have to use everything.
Yeah, sustainability requires the whole ecosystem of all functions. Yeah, it's interesting how you said like maybe TI has a final authority that's a little different than FI. With FE, sometimes it's like about figuring out the values of everyone around. And so you're less personal with that. But like when it comes to deciding what you believe and what your like logical opinion is, TI is the final authority for the information it lets in. Or maybe like there's a finer distinction to be drawn there. My friend Dan calls FI and TI looking for some sort of eternal truth. And I know that sounds like kind of TI because of the word truth, but it's like FI is looking for the truth of what it values, whereas like TI is looking for the truth of this dispassionate piece of data.
Yeah, it's I find it difficult to find for that parallel, because I spent a couple of years really locked into that idea of like, what is the truth, and finding the truth and differentiating between what is true and what is untrue, and what is real and what is unreal. But then I feel like definitions might change from person to person, or how they use it. You know, like the truth that I was seeking for was more like an NF universal kind of truth of like, what is the one constant in the universe, right? Like, what is the one thing that cannot alter, you know? A truth that sort of like can stand on its own and never be changed by anything else. Because the way that I was looking at it, I guess, is that if something can change, then it can be true for a time, but it's not true fundamentally. So I was looking for something that was true fundamentally. It could not be changed.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe like FI and TI look for some sort of fundamental truth that can stand by itself, like you said. And it's like the final authority for determining that. Like it won't just accept someone else's opinion at face value, but it has to like find the truth on its own order. Because like it's like it's like a journey to the truth, a pursuit of purity of the truth.
Journey to the center of the truth. That's interesting. Yeah. But the thing is, like, the reason I was going into that was because I was following this guru online named Muji, and I'm pretty sure he's got like FE. He's on the FETI axis. I could be wrong. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but there's that kind of language of like truth and what other people think of you and other people's feelings and values, blah, blah, blah. And so I got kind of geared up in that vocabulary, I think, for what I was looking for and what I was discovering, and it was totally geared I could transform it into my own saviors of being like, oh yeah, looking within myself in an abstract kind of way about who am I and like what is consciousness inside myself kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to your journey about finding out your type, because you've told me about that before, and how you used to take tests and you used to get INFP on them. And it's interesting because you're a jumper, so you're an ISFP jumper, so you have FI, which is like, it got the dichotomy right, because like you do lead with savior intuition and savior feeling. And so I actually think like INFP is a really common mistype for, I mean, ISFPs commonly mistype as INFP a lot, like in my life too. a lot of my ISFP friends initially, when they take a test, they get INFP, like you did. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Do you think your friends are jumpers as well, or is it just like the tests we know are kind of flawed, just based on what they consider to be intuitive versus sensory? I can't even really remember the kind of questions they ask on these tests, but like 16 types. And because I don't have the facts, I don't know if I can really speak strongly on this, but I'm pretty sure like the intuitive that they're describing is not the intuitive that we're describing, in which in objective personality we describe intuition more like abstract, the unseen. It's very much like sensory. It would be the factual world of what, like who, what, when, where kind of thing that you can measure. And then the abstract intuition is more like the why and the how and the unseen connections, and like making metaphors between, like, to illustrate something that's real, but in such an unreal way that it has like no physical actual bearing on reality whatsoever. It's just trying to help someone understand through like a disparate connection that's completely abstract. That's not because maybe we can't use the tools of sensory as well. Like, I don't know. Or maybe we're just trying to make a more universal connection.
I agree. I would say that like the official MBTI and like classical Jungian work does also characterize like intuition and sensing in that same way. It's just that 16 personalities is its own beast. It has a very inaccurate way of defining it.
Yeah.
My friend Dan, like he has a tweet where he says 16 personalities, or like any test online is like for the sensing and intuition, like, are you a boring person? Or are you a complex person with your own imagination?
That's great. It's so true, though, as well. It's like, are you a creative person, or have you never imagined before? Which is, I guess, why people are more drawn to intuitive, like when they're doing tests like that. Maybe like the strongest SIs would not get an intuitive type doing those self-reporting tests, but you never know. I mean, like that's the problem too, is the self-reporting. Like these things jump out to us in our life where we might be acting in a state that's opposite to our standard way of acting, and it's those that we remember because they had some kind of impact. It's like Dave and Shannon, they say, like, you wake up in those moments where things aren't going as usual, and that's where you latch onto. It's like this moment of where you wake up and you're like, oh, whoa, this is. Whether it's something that like you succeed in your demons, or whether you fail in your demons or your saviors, you wake up, and for that moment you're like, okay, this is who I am. You're basing your identity off of those moments where you're spiking either in a positive or a negative way. But that doesn't really give you the I'm trying to remember this word, like the baseline. Yeah, it doesn't give you the baseline for who you are.
Yeah. Like sometimes self-awareness is skewed because we focus on very biased parts of ourselves. So I have a question for you about your sleep processing. You told me before about your sleep processing and about how it wants to get to a point in its sleep processing. It wants a purpose of what it's consuming, and doesn't like to consume just for the sake of consuming, but it wants to consume to digest something in its sleep. So maybe you could go a bit into that.
Can we just riff on that? Yeah, well, we're talking about the distinction between like the animals. So we kind of have this belief that the animals go from top animal and they filter through to the last animal. And I remember I was confused when I was getting my type because I used to think I was an INFP, and it's like, how am I NI instead of any? Like something that took me a long time to come to grips with. And it's kind of one of the realizations was this animal order of sleep to consume, in which I'm not consuming, like I'm consuming for the self, but it's that the self comes before the consume. It's not like I'm taking in information just for fun, just because I like it. It's like it has to have a purpose. It has to fit into my sleep processing, like what I want to consume. Like even though I'm sleep consuming, by all means, I should be like a consume monster. The only things that I do consume fit into what I'm actually interested or looking into right now. And I hardly consume anything right now. It's like, if I were to write an article or something, I recently started a blog, then the only thing I would consume is like things that would support my arguments or whatever that I've already decided in my mind, or that I'm trying to prove or disprove. And if I find out that I'm wrong, then, like I'm wrong, whatever, we'll go from there. But it's starting off with that idea, my own idea first, and then going to consume to support that or to dissupport that. And so that's kind of how the sleep works, I think, is that I'm fitting the consume into what I've already processed for my identity, for my inner world, rather than consuming to lead to my inner world. And I'm sure some other lead consumes can come in and argue and be like, nah, that's because it's hard to really make these distinctions and refine the difference between sleep first and consume first. But as we were saying, like, it's very much that I consume for what I need to accomplish something rather than consuming for the sake of consuming. Even though I'm savior consume, I rarely, if ever, watch anything just for enjoyment or because I like it.
Yeah, I also relate to that. Like, I'm sleep consume, but I rarely intake information that doesn't have like a point. So I think it might have to do with the NI too. With NI, it wants like a point, like it has to fit into something. It cannot be like just a random disparate thing. NI, it has to like funnel down to something. So I also relate to that. So my question for you, Julian, is how does your masculine SE show up?
I like smashing shit. That's true, but not quite like that. I mean, I do like doing physical stuff and like exerting sensory, but I think it has more to do with memory. Like that's what kind of what we're measuring masculine sensory more for. So I'm working with Austin and Josh, right? And they're feminine sensory. And it just seems kind of normal to me that like we'd be having a conversation and we'd be making a plan for what we do for our channel moving forward. And then they're like, "Are you writing this down?" And I'm like, no, I'm just going to remember it. And they're just like, "What?" And then at the end of the call, I'm like, "Okay, just to recap. So we talked about this, then we talked about this, then we talked about this, then we talked about this, all these things." And they're like, "Whoa, like, I can never do that." I'm like, "Really?" Like that just seems normal to remember facts as it's coming along. Or like when you want to remember something, you remember it. And I don't remember everything. My memory is not that good, but I think just for timelines, it works pretty well. And kind of like fitting in, like, so if this event happened and this year and this other event happened in a later year, and I know that I did something in between those two events, you can kind of pinpoint when something happened in your life, right? Like you have these stakeholders. It's like, I know that I went to like Montreal or whatever in 2011 at the end of the year, right? And I know that I went to India in 2017 in January. And I know that I lived in like 4 different cities in between that. And then I know that like, okay, so first I lived in Montreal, and then I lived in Trail, and then I lived in Nanaimo, and then I lived in, or was that? No, it was Trail, then Calgary, then Nanaimo. And but just like, doing this kind of math, kind of like figuring out like, okay, this block fits here, this block fits there, to figure out a timeline of something. And then just memory, and then just wanting to smash shit, to be honest. Like I love just hitting things and crush, like not in any violent way, like some people kind of like, oh my God, like that's violent. You got like aggression, or are you an angry person? It's just like, no, I just love the feeling of something, just exerting pressure against something, just squeezing, getting squeezed, like punching a punching bag, pushing weights around, just all that stuff. It feels really nice. Martial arts, like it just feels good.
Interesting. Is it the adrenaline that feels good? What about it feels good?
It's a very kinesthetic thing. Like there's no like adrenaline behind it. It's nothing like that. It's just the literal feeling of impact and force just feels like empowering, I guess, in a way. It just feels like maybe endorphins are released or something. It just feels like powerful. I don't know. It feels good. That's how you can describe it.
That's fascinating. So I'd like to ask you about your feminine TE. Could you tell me a bit about that?
I just go along with ideas, to be honest. Like I don't really question. Like if the tribe's like this idea, I'm just like, yeah, that could work. Let's go for it. And then like I don't stop to think like that's a horrible idea. I remember I was doing this job in this greenhouse, and I was working with my brother, who's like more masculine thinking. Like I don't know his exact type, but I think that he might have either masculine TE, or I'm pretty sure it's like masculine TE kind of thing going on. And there's this one guy, and he had this idea, but it was such a dumb idea. And he's just like, let's do this. I can't really remember exactly what it was, but he wanted to do this thing and I was on board. Like part of my mind was kind of like, this doesn't seem like very efficient, but I was like, yeah, let's try it out. Let's go for it. My brother's like, don't listen to him. That's a stupid idea. Let's not do that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That is a stupid idea. Like I just go along with tribe logic, even if it doesn't make any sense, which, and then just kind of like not wanting to get in arguments, like just wanting to be agreeable, wanting to kind of, I saw an interesting post in the community, in the Facebook group, and it was a guy, I can't remember his name, but he's like a TINI kind of guy, and he was kind of riffing on the idea that masculine tribe people will get what they want in the short term, like they try to push on the tribe to get what they want immediately, but the feminine tribe people are kind of playing the long game where they're more agreeable over the long course so that they can get what they want in the long run. And it's like, is this a survival mechanism? Maybe, but it seems to apply really well in my own life, in my own ways. Like yes, I have latched on to being more agreeable and going along with the tribe seems to work out in the long run. When I do want something for myself, or where I do want something, then I can nudge and make it so much more easy than if I was like banging and trying to get things my way in a masculine kind of sense.
That's so interesting. So it's like a feminine way of getting long-term result, but it's like going around the long way to get like things to go a certain way.
Yeah. And it kind of works, I think, better than the masculine in a way. And I mean, the masculine will have success in the short term, but they can also get pushback. It's like when someone really aggressively masculinely wants something to get done, it's not that difficult for other people to be like, oh, I don't know, like, fuck you, man. Like, well, where's this aggression coming from? Like, we're not going to just do what you want because you're being more masculine about it, rather than the easygoing person who's kind of, just using more suggestion, easygoing, beating around the bush type of deal. He can get what they want more further on because he's a more respected person. He's a more valued person in that way. Like they know he's easygoing. It's like, yeah, sure. Like we can move for you because you've moved for us type of deal. And I mean, like, that's how I feel about other people too. It's like, if I know someone can move for me and I can move for them, then it's easy to compromise, rather than if someone's never moving and they constantly expect you to move. It's just like, no, I've had enough of this. Like, I'm not moving anymore.
It's like you have a good attitude, so maybe people will like turn around and help. Or
yeah, exactly.
So my question for you next is your masculine FI. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, and it's hard to talk about, to be honest, and like not because I'm aware of it and it's something that I feel negative towards or anything like that. It's just, it's like when you get through something, it's hard to remember. Like I remember when I was younger being way more into my masculine FI, in which like I just wouldn't move for somebody if it was something that went against like my values, or if it's something that I didn't want to do or I didn't like, I'd be like, no, I don't like that. And then that would be the end of the conversation, because my identity, and I would burn down a million friendships just to support that masculine FI. Like, I don't like that. It doesn't fit into my FI. Sorry, the world can burn around me, but masculine FI is not moving for that. Oop, dropped my phone. I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Now I like to think that I can compromise a bit more. Like if I don't like something, then I can go along with it. It's not such a big deal. If it goes against my values, then it's a bit more difficult, because those values were built up over a lot of years. And I like to think that they came from somewhere. So it's like, I'm not going to go along and hurt somebody, right? Because that doesn't fit into my values. I'm not going to go along just because the tribe is like, let's get this guy. I'll be like, no, like, I don't do that. That's not how I operate. So I'm going to take a stand, and I'm not going to do that. And that's kind of the masculine FI. And it comes up in weird sort of demon states as well. Like I can have examples of where I responded really negatively, I think, because of masculine FI, in which case, like, this is kind of personal, but in any case, like, I remember I was hanging out with my brother. I have a twin brother, and I was just hanging out with him one day. And I always kind of felt bad, because I never felt like I treated him with due respect, or like as well as I could have, just because like opposite types and various like I feel like FI and I or sleep is very kind of just confident in themselves in a way. Like maybe not true confidence, but they just like they don't need anybody else in a way, even though we do. We all need somebody in the end. But he was playing more of the play archetype, in which he was kind of like, I want to play, and I'm playing more like the sleep archetype, in which I'm just like no, leave me alone. You're annoying. Let me just do my own thing. Push away, push away, push away, kind of thing. And then I felt at a point when I became older, that I'm like, man, I wasn't acting very maturely, which makes sense. Kids, how can kids act maturely? But it's like, I wish I treated him better when I was younger. And then one day he came up to me and he's just like, why have you always treated me like so, in such a way, like in such a disrespectful way? And like, he hit this sore point that I was conscious of, but that I never really put the energy into working. And like, I just like switched into a demon state. Like, I just like, to be honest, like, this is really bad, but I was just like, fuck you, like, go to hell, like, go die, like, just the worst of the worst kind of thing. Is because I think that was the masculine FI response of being hit in my identity, of like, my identity is being shoved against, and I something in a negative spot, possibly my demons as well, of like not using the TE or the SE very well. And so like, this concoction just made me release this kind of like, burn everybody down and I'll stand alone over here kind of thing, and I'll be by myself masculinely. So I still don't really know how to describe masculine FI. I'm sure I'm doing like not a great job of it. I'm sure it crops up in various other ways, of like, maybe like, oh, I'm the authority of what I like or what I dislike, blah blah blah. I guess it's also kind of cropped up in, and well, I would like to see someone who's feminine FI as like a savior, to see what the difference is, if it's just FI stuff I'm talking about, or if it's actually like masculine FI stuff I'm talking about. Because you'd think with feminine FI they'd be more movable on their identity, and see, that's something that I'm not really super movable on, is my sense of identity. It's like who I am, who I built myself about, what my worldviews are. They can be adjusted, but I feel like I said something. Was I saying something to Austin about like, it's something like along the lines of, I can bend, but I can't move, in a way. That's how I feel masculine FI is like. I can bend, but I can't move.
Yeah, like,
Which makes
that's
no
a really
sense,
good.
really, unless you're
No,
like
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like your feminine TE can accommodate like people and their logic. Like, so you can bend to that, but like when it comes to like that firm of value, or what, like firm what you like or dislike or whatever FI is, like, you stay like
Yeah.
a tree with rooted in the ground. And
Yeah.
so you mentioned this idea about how your masculine FI burns down relationships if it doesn't jive or match your values. And they have a term for this. It's called a repulsion switch. Like when the FI repulsion switch is turned on, it's
Repulsion
like,
switch.
yeah,
Right, yeah, I
it's
think
like
I've
it
heard this.
burns relationships down.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I remember hearing about this in MBTI terms back in the day, before I found objective personality. And it's true. The repulsion switch is horrible, because being a single decider as well, it's like you either like something too much or you dislike something too much. There's not that balance. And so with being an IP and being FI, it's like either you love this person and then you hit that, and then if enough negativity comes in, then the repulsion switch happens, and then you like start to become disgusted by it. And it's not fair. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to yourself either, because people are flawed, like nobody's perfect, and how you idealize somebody is not the reality of who they are, and building up your perspective of somebody and your relationship with that person based on the ideals is not real. And so it's never going to work.
You're very self-aware, and I love hearing your dialogue. So now I'm wondering about your feminine NI and how that shows up in your life.
The feminine NI, I think, is something that I can sort of pinpoint more. It's sort of like, I can put something out there in the future, and I don't know how exactly I'm going to get there, but I know that I can work around and get there. It's kind of like, I have this future projection. I know some things that I'm going to do to get there, but I can also adapt to changing circumstances. Like, it's not so solid. Like, say, for example, I did have this plan, when I came to New Zealand. I'm in New Zealand now. I'm from Canada originally, Vancouver. And so when I came here, my original plan was to just sort of stay here, challenge myself, grow, and then go back to Canada and start a reselling business because I really want to get into kind of entrepreneurship. And I know that that's a great sort of stepping stone, like a first step into entrepreneurship is just basic reselling. And there's blueprints online that you can follow after to know that this is something that actually works in reality. And so I was dabbling with that before I came to New Zealand. And then when I got here, I was like, okay, my plan is to stay here until May and then go back to Canada. And then the COVID crisis happened, the pandemic, and I'm like, I'm not going to go back to Canada, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to start a reselling business now with the model that I was going to work with. People who are more experienced, I think, could make it work right now, but I didn't really have confidence in me making it work. And I'm like, that's fine. The plan adapts. Like, I'm going to do this other stuff, and I'm going to put that further in the future. Like, it's still there, but that's just going to have to happen later. And it doesn't bog me down. I'm not worried. I'm not like immovable with my plans. My plans can adapt to the change. Like, it's the physical facts are masculine. Like, those can't be changed. Those are not movable. Like, this is reality. This is here. But my plan that works around reality can change, and I can flow around reality. Even though I do have plans and I do have like a future for myself that I'm aiming towards, it can adapt with what reality is bringing. And so that's kind of how it operates. And I'd be curious to know what like masculine intuition is, because I feel like I see it rear its head in people who are masculine NI, and it's kind of like this immovableness of like knowing what the future is like, or knowing what the connection is happening. It's kind of like, but do you know? Do you like, what's your experience with it?
I view it as long-term strategy. So it's like you understand long-term implications and like the underlying things that result into things. So it's this certainty in your ability to find the core cause of things. So like I see everything in the physical world as symptomatic, like the SE is symptomatic of an NI thing, and I can be immovable with how I see the NI thing because it seems so real. Shannon of Objective Personality, she said that what made my NI masculine was how I block off concepts. So I have this clear like blocking of the concept. Like when you talked about your sensory and it's masculine, you use that language like blocking too. So NI has that element when it's masculine as well. And it can be tough because I have to like think of, it's so hard to describe. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to do.
Do you have any examples of this playing out like in your past or your current? Because like I'm sure you have a plan right now and maybe it's been going along for a few months. Do you have any like examples of this playing out?
I think in my life, I don't deal with a lot of needing to change in that respect because I already considered that and factored that in when I made the NI vision. But I notice with my masculine NI, it shows up when I'm thinking about other people's visions for themselves. And the thing is, like, I kind of have a firm idea of where I think their relationships go or something, like where a red flag in their relationship will take them. And so I can be kind of certain and immovable with how I see the relationship, like finally, like the outcome turning out. It's like, you know, friends going out and I notice a problem. I'm more immovable with how I see that because it's kind of like, well, I'm seeing it, you know, like you can't change the color purple to be less purple, but you, you know,
sure feminine. You
can. That's how masculine NI feels like. When you see the color purple, you can't unsee it.
But do you know what's kind of funny is like, I only recently learned this doing kind of an article from Donald Hoffman and all that, but there's a tribe in the Amazon that because of their language, because of how their linguistics inform their worldview, they literally don't see a differentiation between like green all the way to purple. Like the spectrum ends on green, and like blues and purples and stuff is all the same color to them of that green. And so it's like they don't even see that. So that's all I'm saying when I was like, purple is purple. I'm like, well, you know, because our linguistics informal. There's really no point to it. I'm sorry, I didn't even need to.
Oh no, but that's true. Yeah. Well, I would say that my NI is flexible and fluid in that respect too. Like I acknowledge the full complexity of ideas. Like I know, like I can see how a tribe like that could see it differently and not have that type of differentiation too. I
Yeah.
think like what makes
Ah,
my NI
you're making me
masculine,
think here.
yeah, because I
Sorry.
feel like my NI would consider the same thing you did there. But I guess I'm just more certain that unless like a drastic change happens, that things go on a certain path, and that's like a certain trajectory happens unless a drastic change happens. But I acknowledge the complexity of an idea, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
And yeah, I believe so. I mean, I kind of locked on to one idea, I'm not gonna lie, while you're saying there. And it just made me think like, and I may be more of a personal thing because you're like, I understand and respect the complexity of the world and all these other point of views and what these other people are going through. And it feels like the one thing that was unsaid there was like, but for me and my observations of the patterns, it's like this. And you can be aware of what the other people are observing in their patterns and what's real and what's unreal and what works and what doesn't work for them. But when it comes to your personal experience of your own, because I was wondering this the other day, is that like if NI is kind of introverted, personal, abstract, is it our path? Like, is it our future? Is it our plans for ourselves? That's interesting if it is personal thing like that. So you can be aware of what other people are going through and the other patterns that emerge in the world. But when it applies to your own, you can still be masculine and you can still
Yeah.
ignore those and be like, those don't apply to me in a sense.
It's like I can acknowledge that there are other patterns, but what I lock onto is that single pattern that's relevant to whatever I'm focusing on. So it was interesting how you said, Julian, like, so you said a lot, Joyce, but I'm locking on to this one idea because I want to like flesh it out more because there's some sort of
Yeah.
personal pertinence it has to
Yeah,
understanding
exactly.
something
Because
more.
like I need something like when I'm trying to connect with people and when I'm trying to understand what people are saying, like people can say a lot of stuff and I'm like, okay, that's I don't get what they're saying right now. But then when they finally say something that I can connect in from a personal perspective, then I'm like, I'm locking onto that. Like I'm just gonna grab a hold of that one and be like, okay, now we can flesh this out. And then sometimes it's just like something that I'm very curious about. Like you said something a while back, you're saying that the SE is symptomatic of the NI, and I was like, that sounds very fascinating. It sounds very intelligent, and I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I'd be curious to know what you meant by that. But then we moved on. I was like, okay, that's fine. We don't have to talk about that. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, like SE is the entire detailed representation of like reality and like actually like taking it in. And I feel like NI sees that symptom of like that detailed representation and then funnels it down to, okay, so this is the trend it's on. This is like what the specific pattern you're saying is, right? It's like taking that and taking the symptoms and
Ah,
arriving at a core cause. So it's like
right.
a single interpretation of the symptoms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. It's kind of like the NI is an algorithm, and the numbers that the algorithm shoots out is the SE in a way.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
Does that make
Well, and I was trying to go for like that single interpretation from everything because it wants to
hmm
get to the point. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Julian. So I have more
No,
questions for
I
you.
agree with you. Two feminine tribe members here. No, I need to agree with you.
Oh, thank you, Julian's feminine FI. I mean, thank you, Julian's feminine T. So,
No,
what type of advice would you give to ISFPs that are similar to you?
my advice to ISFPs that are similar. I'm glad you asked this question because I was actually thinking about this last night. It was kind of keeping me awake at night last night, thinking about what I would suggest because, like, one, I don't really think I'm in the best position to give suggestions. But if I was to give suggestions to like a younger version of myself or somebody who was like very similar to my type, it would be like as soon as possible, roll into your FI value system that challenges and doing things that you're afraid of and putting yourself under pressure, incorporate that into your values as soon as you possibly can. because that's where you're going to grow. That's where you're going to expand. Like if it's true that the system works as kind of like a filter in which like we go from top to bottom, and so like the demons have to fit into the saviors in a sense. Like my play has to fit into my sleep, FINI, and my TE, helping other people and making things work for other people, has to fit into my FI. And the sooner I can do that, the better. And the sooner that I realize, okay, so helping people, if that's a demon, that makes me a more complete version of myself. And so I can incorporate that into my FI. And the sooner you can do that, the more freedom I think you can have to compromise on things, to lessen your ego, to lessen your sort of FI hold that's keeping you more constricted or contracted in the world, and keeping you immovable, and keeping you like, it's slowing you down, really. I mean, like, it's powerful. It's a double-edged sword, though, you know, like it cuts, and it cuts you as well. And so if you can dull that edge that's cutting yourself by incorporating the TE and the other aspects of reality into it, then the faster you can do that, I think the more you'll feel freedom, like true freedom in your life. I think that would be the best advice I would give, is just move towards fear, move towards struggle, move towards all that the painful stuff, so that you can learn some valuable lessons, become a more mature person, become a more comfortable person in this world under whatever situation, and just have more freedom, really, internally.
It's like, yeah, move towards the discomfort. If you're feeling discomfort, like to grow in that area, because discomfort is a sign that there might be something to gain from going into that and coming out on the other side.
Yeah, and it's the thing about like NI is that people with NI should be able to project pretty well into an idea that's like, what would happen if I did that, and then be able to feel like if that would be uncomfortable or not uncomfortable. And so if you can project and see like, okay, this is uncomfortable, or this would be uncomfortable, then move towards it, because, you know, you'll feel like you can handle way more in this life. You know, it's not that life becomes any easier. It's just that you become better at handling any situation that comes your way. And with that, life becomes easier. But life isn't becoming easier. It's just you become better at handling it. It's kind of circular logic, but I feel like that's how it works.
Yeah, it's like you gain the tools to deal with life better, but life is still at the same difficulty setting. Or
if anything,
like,
it gets harder, really. But you just gotta stay a step ahead.
Absolutely.
Really.
Well, there's this saying that you're always going to have problems in life. It's all about having problems that you'd rather have. Or it's like having problems that you like. You cannot like have that thought that you can obliterate all problems from existence, but you can create a life where you have better problems to deal with and that ones that are worth dealing with, that you care about. Because everything comes with a set of problems. I don't know where I was going with that.
And if NI is fitting stuff into a box, I feel like you can use that NI to sort of like brush over all these problems that are arising in your life. You can say all these problems are good because they fit into my development, or they fit into my better understanding the world, or they fit into my finding the truth, or like whatever you want to put, whatever words you want to put on it that works for you. You just say like, this is making me better equipped for, this is making my dealing with life better, this is making my life situation better, whatever the problem is, because you're fitting that into the NI of all problems, fit into one box of, it's a problem, overcoming a problem makes you stronger. And so you can sort of wrap up all problems into that. And so when you see like, here comes a problem that's going to make my life better, nice, it's good. It's going along with what you're saying. It's like, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's like, you're going to have problems in life no matter what. That's a given. But if you can have the kind of problems that, like, if you get to choose the problems that you have, or maybe it's not even if you get to choose the problems that you have, but if you can actually like see the value in the problems that you're having, then that already gives you more strength to overcome the problems, makes problems smaller in a way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And with problems, like even if everything in that situation is dark, you improve a certain skill when you go through a problem. You either like improve your character, or you have the chance to improve your character or improve your certain skill set, like your tolerance for dealing with situations like that. Or you even like learn a lesson about what you don't want from that. So there's so much gold to be in situations that are uncomfortable and to like go into that.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Thank you so much, Julien. You were a really lovely guest, and you had a lot of nuggets into your life that you shared with us that I'm so like happy to hear about. You're clearly very self-aware, and thank you for benefiting everyone with your self-awareness.
Thanks.
Yeah, and
Shining
Julien
that
has
little junior demon.
yes, and Julien has his own YouTube channel with his friends, and I'll link that below. Thank you so much for coming on, Julien.
Yeah,
And
I got a blog too if you want to link that. I mean, I don't take advantage of your whole audience. Doesn't that kind of applies, but you know, all good.
For sure. And thank you, audience members, for viewing this far. And so I'll see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.